Skinny Fizz, smashed up limes or raspberries, and triple filtered sparkling water. The limes that we use come from Gisborne. The lemons come from Gisborne. The raspberries come from Waikato.
Skinny Fizz. We're going to introduce the masses, the podcast fans, to Skinny Fizz, the thinking behind Skinny Fizz, the man, the legend himself behind Skinny Fizz, Shawn Beck. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, legend in my own mind. Thanks very much. This is the first telling of our story. I've always had I've always struggled to get a story across in, a little size on a website or a couple of blogs. And so we've kind of never really told our story, Ryan. So this is, for better or for worse, this is the first time that we've actually told it, to be honest.
It's good to have the space to actually take the time to tell the stories. I think when your website, I've got it open here, it's very good at getting you to buy. That's always a good thing. There's a funnel going on there. It does talk about the product benefits and what is in the can, but also what isn't in the can. I think what's not in it is as important as what does go into it. But before we get onto the actual product itself, let's start with the story side of it. Let's start with Shawn Beck, what you were doing prior to Skinny Fizz, and then the thinking or the lens that made you think, actually, I need to start a carbonated flavoured water company. Because this isn't being offered in the way that you wanted to see it be offered at supermarket shelves around New Zealand.
Okay, yeah. So I spent about 19 years in venture capital and private equity. In fact, I was one of the founders of the first venture capital fund here in New Zealand. It's called the Greenstone Fund. The government was actually an investor, funnily enough. And they did very well, in fact. Rarely did I come across a eureka moment or a silver bullet moment in my sort of, I was on the boards of, say, 15 different companies, and rarely came across that. But I think I actually had one. So I was on a bucket list roadie with my wife and soulmate, Cindy, across the American West, and somewhere hot desert. And I was popping my, 100th can of flavored sparkling water. And I was thinking to myself, this is all right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But then I kind of remembered when I first arrived in New Zealand a long time ago, I ate a carrot. Now, okay, how are you going to put carrots in this together? Having lived for 23 years in America, moved to New Zealand, ate this carrot, and I thought, wow, carrots actually have a taste. It had flavor. It kind of almost exploded with flavor in my mouth, and I wasn't used to that eating American carrots. And I thought to myself, all right, this flavored sparkling water, it's all right, but we definitely can do this better. Let's pop some zing and kiwi lemons and limes in here and see what actually happens, and see if we can actually get something that tastes really good. So that was the kind of eureka moment in a little Airbnb in Seattle. And as I say, I don't come across those very often. So I decided to go ahead and do something about this one. So there's a gap in the market that I see. I love Coke. Since I was 8 years old, earlier probably, but my mom wouldn't even want to hear that. I was drinking Coke, and I love Coke, but I can't drink 3 Cokes a day. I find them too sweet. Now taste buds change, and so I was firmly in the soda stream and smashing a lemon into a glass and pouring some soda stream into it. And I thought, well, can we make this? So 18 months later, we figured out that, yeah, we could actually make it, where it's just lemons, limes, raspberries, smashed into a pulp, basically, and made into an extract, filtered once, and that's it. And that's what goes in, and that's the flavor. So I thought, cool, we can actually do something that doesn't taste like lime lolly or lemon dish soap. And then I also spent about the same 18 months putting a business and a supply chain around it. Okay, because why? It's because I want to change the world, and I'm a little crazy.
How can the Skinny Fizz drink change the world? And while you answer that, I'm going to have another.
Good on you, mate. So first up, it's not bad for you. So I thought, we drink an awful lot of stuff that's not particularly good for you. Secondly, it tastes good, we think. And never really been all that happy. And I've talked to a lot of people, and there's a lot of people not that happy about what things taste like. Now, these are little things, but we drink an awful lot of things in our day, and things that we drink that are bad for you. And obviously something, if we can replace it, then it's a good thing to do. One of the key things that I wanted to do was make this affordable. So our sort of pillars of our business include the fourth one, which is we are in the supply chain business. And so that 18 months was also spent putting together something where we could actually sell this at a price that everyone can afford. And that's not easy, given that we started with 0 volumes and we're competing with companies that are producing millions and millions and millions of liters every year. So cans rather than plastic, that should be obvious. That's any plastic bottle we replace with a can is a good thing. Aluminium is infinitely recyclable. This can has half of the aluminium is already recycled, so it's already using a heavy amount of recycled material. Not bottles, because they are heavy and they use a lot more carbon to move around. So diesel equals carbon in the atmosphere. So the drink aspect is something that's not bad for you, something that's affordable, is a treat, and makes you feel better, hopefully, but not bad for you again. From a business perspective, and this is where the little bit of craziness comes in. As I said, I spent 19 years on 17 boards, I think. And in fact, in the beginning of my private equity days, there was a thing called the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing. And we were one of the early signatories to that. And that's all about putting environmental, social, and governance principles into your investing. And we were one of the early investors signed up to that. And because we thought at the time, and I still think, and this is now 25 years later, that companies need to be thinking about good and not just profit. And so we are trying where we can to, as I say, use as least materials as we can. We try not to cover it all in ink. Our boxes aren't covered in all sorts of colors. As I said, we don't actually have a carbon footprint ourselves. So we use shared resources everywhere. So we use third-party warehouses. We don't own any vehicles. We don't own a factory. We haven't built any new buildings or anything like that. So our own carbon footprint is very low. We have supported New Zealand Forest Restoration Trust, and we have looked at things that we can support from an environmental point of view that's more proactive. And we are supporting various things in a small way, but that's a little bit of a harder one, and we're still finding our way in that one. But we also wanted to say, so part of our pillar is planet being what I was just talking about, people being something that's not bad for you, but also see if we can do some good for people along the way. So we are a supporter of women's basketball. We don't sort of market to young people. We do support youth. Again, a lot of it through basketball. We pay living wage plus. So everyone in our company is on living wage plus. And so, everybody says it these days, and it seems like it's a really easy, we want to be a good company and all that. But look, I'm old now. I mean it. So I have one chance to kind of help change the world, and this is it. If we can make Skinny Fizz a big thing, then I would love to take Skinny Fizz into a much more active role in the public debate about policy, for instance, or other things like that. But hey, we're crawling at this point. Well, we're not even crawling yet. So that's for another day.
Shawn, as you've gone through some of those moments of thinking that it'll be made of aluminium, it won't be made of glass, or we're not going to put ink on it, and we're not going to add ink to the cardboard boxes where it's not necessary. At each of those stages, you're really working to constraints that you've chosen to work to the constraints. What were some of the things that actually got hard to achieve when maybe other companies that might be wanting to go down this route but are concerned that it's going to add time or complexity or cost, or it's going to be difficult? And even if there is upside from the consumer demand who want to make positive choices for not just themselves, the community, this is going to be hard to do, and is now the right time to do it? What's kind of the message through your experience that you'd have for them?
I'm still learning, and I'm still finding our way here to a degree. So any message I have is probably going to be hopefully taken with a grain of salt. The hardest thing to do is, from a company starting out for us, is to actually have any meaningful impact with a very limited budget. So we're lucky. I'm lucky that we started out with at least some resources, because I had a background in venture capital and private equity, and we at least had some financial resource, and so we're able to kind of, I guess, follow my whim there to a certain degree. For people starting out, the hardest thing is actually to say, well, how do I make a meaningful impact? I was talking to you before about, I guess, the environmental impact, and so at every choice where we took a decision along the way, obviously we tried to make it so it didn't add cost. Where it added cost, then you kind of said, okay, that's all fine, because the things in terms of the product themselves, like for instance not using plastic, that's absolutely fundamental, right? So even though a can is definitely more expensive than a plastic bottle, it's absolutely fundamental to the planet. I mean, so those were kind of easy. But as soon as I get into, say, the environmental, to make an impact in the environmental area for us is almost impossible. So that's been one of the really hardest ones. So what we've been trying to do is just make sure we target our efforts as much as we can to the areas that have the highest impact, because we can't get everything. One day we will, but not yet.
I think it's a matter of each business playing their part. And there's a book called Project Drawdown that looks at the 100 things that their existing technology solutions or education solutions to bring the world's temperature back down to 0 degrees warming from expected 1.5 or 2 degrees. And it doesn't require one business to do everything or one sector. It's a patchwork of solutions, of which recycling is a component, and how we reuse products or raw ingredients. So I don't think you need to necessarily take it all on your shoulders, but by sharing some of the things you're doing now, it can make it easier for others who want to go on that journey.
I'm such a fan of the let's just do what we can wherever possible. Just do what we can. Little things, just every little thing. I agree 100%. They'll all add up, and it will make a massive difference. Yeah. Buy local. This should be right up your alley in terms of, we started from the very beginning, buy local, in part because that was actually an easier way of minimizing our impact on the planet. So as long as things aren't moving around, then obviously you're not pumping carbon into the atmosphere. So for instance, the limes that we use come from Gisborne, the lemons come from Gisborne, the raspberries come from Waikato. So even the small component stuff we've sourced locally as well. Plus, as I was saying before, they just taste a hell of a lot better. So yeah, but it is a lot of small things can definitely make a difference, Ryan. I agree.
Let's talk about what's not in the can, right? That maybe the audience is thinking, well, what's different about, okay, you've done all these things around the business, the processes, the supply chain, the branding, digital subscriptions to buy. But what about what's not in here that may be in cans of drink that people are already buying?
Okay, so the clue's in the name, Skinny Fizz. Skinny is to do with the fact that there's only sparkling water and a bit of lime extract. So what's not in there is lollies, sugar, artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, preservatives. I don't know, I could go on and on and on. So yeah, so basically what's not in there is everything except for what we want in the drink, which is smashed up limes or raspberries and triple filtered sparkling water. And so, yeah, and it's, it's funny. It's, you could actually slip quite a few things into drinks and not actually have to put it on the labels. I don't know if I should be saying this, but it's true. There are ways to put things into drinks that you don't necessarily have to label. You can slip preservatives in as long as they're natural, that sort of stuff. It's quite an interesting little world out there, what goes on in sort of drink land. I'm not saying anyone's doing this. I'm just saying that is what can happen. So yeah, so no, again, I just wanted to, as close to possible, reproduce smashing up some limes. Okay, I will open one, or some fruit, and just putting some sparkling water in with it. So just to give you a feel for what is in it, I guess, Ryan, not to answer your question again, but so when I'm pouring in my raspberry here, if you can see this, so what's not in there is any dyes or colorings, but raspberry skins are red, and so what is in there is raspberry skins. In fact, sometimes what is in there is, and we've had a few people actually ask us about it, is you'll get little black pips that'll be floating around in a tiny little black pips. So sometimes what is in there is, what is that? Oh, it's just pips. Okay. So sometimes, yeah, but we thought, the least you take out of it from the extract point of view, the more flavor you retain. Plus, you get a better bead. Right, so the bead is the size of the bubble, and the bigger the bubble, the kind of more harsh mouthfeel you get.
That's right. That's what they say with champagne, isn't it? That you want smaller bubbles.
And because this has a little bit of impurities in it, i.e., the fruit bits floating around it creates a smaller bead. And so that was just a side effect. I'd love to say we invented that, but that was just a side effect of using natural fruit like that. So, so, it's amazing what we put into our bodies, especially with what we drink. So what's not in there is all sorts of stuff that I had along the journey offered to be put into it to make it better, to make it last longer. Those two things in particular, or to make it cheaper. But it's not a natural drink then.
Where is the natural drink industry at overseas? I mean, because you're competing against some pretty strong like natural human biases towards things that we love as humans. We love the fats and the sugars, and there are ingredients we're attracted to. So you don't have that sugar ingredient in there any more than the natural extracts of the raspberries or lime or lemon can provide. So where do you see this ending up? Or are there indications overseas that are ahead of where we're at in New Zealand of how to help more Kiwis get access to a product that has less sugar in it?
Yeah, so it goes like this. New Zealand is probably pretty much the same as the whole global beverage market. I think we're pretty much the same. When Cindy and when I had the eureka moment and we were suddenly excited and wandering around to every supermarket in Nevada, Colorado, Wyoming, et cetera, what we found was there are a lot of drinks from a few big, huge brands. There are an awful lot of different drinks, and you might not know that they're all from a few big brands. And there are very few differentiated drinks, very few natural ones. In the States, there's a thing called Spindrift in America, and they got going a couple of years, about 5 years, 6 years ago now. And they, very similar, but they just put more juice. They put extra juice and more of it into the drink. So it does actually have some sweetness to it. So it tastes a bit different, but it is a fully natural drink. And they're actually, that brand is actually going very well in the States. It's quite big now. But there's not very many. There's not much, Australia, the US, which I know both those countries intimately well. I don't know Europe, so I couldn't comment, but certainly in I guess and also in Asia, it's not dissimilar through countries in Asia that I've been through. And so, yeah, the big brands basically dominate, and they're running a business. They're running a business model based on volume. They put out a lot of new products every month, but there's not a lot of innovation going on. The beverage market's one of the last non-disrupted industries left on the planet, I reckon, because it's the same big behemoths that run it and own it, and they're producing pretty much the same drinks. They're still searching for the holy grail of natural sweeteners without any calories, which, yeah, they've been looking for quite some time. But they dominate the industry. And so, the only drinks that I think people can get are from little startups like us, which, look, unfortunately, don't usually last very long or end up in the very premium end of the market. So, and this is one of the things that we're doing, which is quite a bit different, which is trying to be affordable. And so, Karma Cola is a fabulous example of a great company with an amazing drink. I mean, I love Karma Cola's drinks, but it's a premium product. Okay. And so that's the target. That's the market that they've focused on, and that's where they are. And we want to try and create something in the mass market. And that doesn't exist. I have some theories as to why that might be, based on the fact that, it's dominated by multinationals, but, there's not a lot out there, right? Natural drinks. It does, apart from, as I say, the premium end, the mass end, on supermarket shelves and whatever, it's pretty hard. They're pretty hard to find. So here's a theory. I don't know if this is a strategy or an outcome, but the big brands, so they dominate the market, and rather than using their market power to have prices that are up here where they earn a fantastic rate of return and they make lots and lots of money, but the prices are sufficiently high that they can let the new entrants might be able to come in. Now, whether it's a strategy or an outcome, I'm not sure, but the pricing is just set down here, just a little bit lower, where they're not earning quite the same return that they could otherwise be earning. So they're sacrificing a bit of profitability, but they've completely de-risked their industry. Now, I'm sure they're not doing this together or anything else, but it's absolutely sensible business strategy to basically pull the prices down, suck the profitability out of the industry so that it makes it extremely hard for anyone to create a new brand, break in, and you basically have the industry yourself. And that's essentially the way the drinks market works here in the US, in Australia, UK, probably most everywhere.
That's some formidable challenges, because you're dealing with one of the most important attributes in marketing of price to drive behavior. And if you want to drive market share, you just reduce your price. But that as an alternative operator, if you like, using some of the telco language I used to use, there are different direct channels that you can then work on to try and at least disintermediate the channel to market if you can't differentiate on the price point without bleeding your capital dry to get up and running. But that requires that creates almost a debt for your buyer, or for you, depending on how you do your marketing, to actually reach that person, acquire them as a customer, keep them in terms of a subscription or a rebuy rate where your channel is completely separate from those supermarkets or from those higher competitive areas where you might be competing against some incumbent lock-ins.
Absolutely, and that's the challenge we face. And you're absolutely right; it's very challenging. Now, I knew that before we started. So I mean, I spent almost 10 years on the board of restaurant brands, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, and Starbucks here, and have a little bit of understanding about how some of the way some of the drinks markets work and the big brands operate and behave. And I knew it was very challenging. And you're absolutely right; it is very challenging. But there is a slow way, and that's the kind of way we're going, which is in the retail space, which is to get into cafes, food places, restaurants, to get into foodstuff supermarkets, because they're all owner operated. So, and we're in now 8 foodstuff supermarkets. We're also in Faro Fresh up in Auckland. Great, and the stores that we're in are all fantastic retail outlets. So New World's, the majority of the supermarkets were in fantastic. Faro is what an amazing store chain that is. So that was always going to be slow, kind of knew it. Now COVID slowed it down quite a bit, obviously. The last 6 months have been a black hole, and it's probably going to carry on for a little while longer, I'd imagine. But you're absolutely right. We have almost from the beginning. So we've launched our first product in December of 2018. That was our first batch we did, 90,000 cans. And we, I think 2 months later, had an online store up and running, because part of our strategy, what I call the multi-channel trial strategy. So multi-channel, so retail being supermarkets, cafe outlets, restaurant outlets, and then online, as you were just mentioning, and you're spot on. Food and beverage is one thing that isn't really that regularly purchased online. But we thought, okay, online is definitely a way to do it. There's a brand in the UK called Ugly, which is I love what they kind of stand for, and it's great. And they're almost all, they have retailers as well, and so they have some of the really good upmarket retailers, but they also, their business model is basically subscription, and we're not following that, but funnily enough, we're in that kind of footsteps. And so we had an online shop 3 months into our journey. So that's 17 months ago, we set our online shop up. And, it's slow. It's hard work. It costs money to acquire customers. Thankfully, not back in the day that I seem to remember when we used to spend $5 million a year on TV advertising. I couldn't find out where that went. But it's not that bad, thankfully, but it definitely costs money. You're right. COVID has helped that, however. So the flip side is that COVID-19 has certainly made people change the way they operate, and said to people, actually, I will buy online. And so we've had a predictable kind of, I wouldn't say explosion, but big growth in our online business. And you alluded to subscriptions. We just, I guess, soft launched subscriptions, i.e. we just kind of put it on the website and put it up as an offering. And, people are trickling on to the subscription. One of the insights we got was that we did a bit of market research with our so we've done probably now about 4,000 online orders in total. We kind of did a slice of about 100 of our least regular buyers, people who have bought once or twice maybe, but then not bought again. And it was interesting that I think the barrier that we have is getting over I forgot. I remembered, and then I didn't have time. I couldn't be bothered. So it's sort of thought, okay, well, obviously a subscription model, is the way to make it as easy as possible for people who are in crazy busy days. So, so without any launching of any sort, we've had people actually picking up on it. And I think, we've crossed over 100 or so subscribers without doing anything with it. So, I think I'd love to be able to have, our model is that we can sell through good retailers, we can sell through good cafe / stock bar or whatever stockists, and we sell online. And we have a 12-pack for our online sales. We have 4-packs for supermarkets. So 4-packs, which are our supermarket product. And interestingly, I think with the various need states and buying patterns that people will go through, a 4-pack is something that they'll pick up when they are in the supermarket and they want to just grab it and they think, oh, actually, I could use that, or we're having some people over and I want a mixer or whatever. A 12-pack can be used something that they maybe drink, every other day, and at a cafe they can get a single sale can. So they're all complementary. But
they are, and you can't avoid to not service each of those channels, because they give you different things. Like in a cafe, you've got someone there who's your free salesperson saying, this is Skinny Fizz, this is all natural, this is low in sugar, here's the environmental story behind it. If you're lucky, you know, if they've taken on board some of the collateral you provide. Whereas in the supermarket, it's an interesting space because you get someone that takes home 4 of your units, and any good restaurateur will tell you that if you can get someone to try and retry your product 3 or 4 times, there's a higher likelihood of creating a habitual use case. So if you've got 4 line ones of these, maybe it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon that you start having it because you're working from home, or if it's at work, like, you know, we've got it here, you hear one person grab it and someone else goes, oh yeah, I feel like that as well. So that habitual side of it, I'm always probably my biggest strength is my biggest weakness is the e-commerce side of it. I love because you get all of that data of when someone orders, and if you throw in the mix a bit of transactional marketing where you text someone, you know, rebuy, and you provide a single, you know, unique link to them, you can be their memory as well to get that rebuy to potentially then move to the subscription. But it's a lot to balance. Like in your position, Shawn, it's like you can do all of that and still just be thankful to be breaking even, right?
Yeah. Well, we're on a mission for growth. We have to have a volume business, otherwise it won't work, because we're on a low margin business. To be affordable for people, even in mail order, it's a very low margin. So we have to be volume. So we have to crack a lot of people, no question. That's definitely our mission. The good thing is that excuse me, people's reaction to the drink is that they love it or they hate it. 70% love it, 30%, sorry, not hate it, just can't really taste it. It's just interesting, which I can kind of understand. It is a light flavor, and that's deliberate because I think that tastes the best. But the 70% that like it really like it. And what you said before about the cafe, the person in a cafe, I've even been sold to in a cafe that we're stocked in, that because they drink, because the person the lady who was talking to me drinks it and likes it, she was telling me all about it, and I was, wow, this is fantastic. She was telling me that it's all New Zealand fruit, and that's not on the can. It doesn't say all New Zealand fruit on the can. It's just, made in New Zealand, but it's not. You'd have to find to see that. Oh, it doesn't say made in New Zealand from local and imported ingredients. You'd have to kind of find that. Well, she obviously figured it out. So, and we hadn't told that cafe yet. We hadn't kind of onboarded them yet. So, yeah. So we do get where someone can talk about the drink. We get great. Just, I guess people like it. People love it. And but we are trying to do something completely. Like it is degree of difficulty 9.9. It is not easy, and so far, touch wood, it's going well. The key things are that we have a different drink and that people like it, and that they recognize it for what it is, and that some of our what we're trying to do in the world is coming through. I haven't seen any. There aren't any big obstacles that will stop us. That if we just keep hammering away at this, and I'm going to jot down a couple of things you just said about text and single button links. But anyway, we keep hammering away at the retail side and at the online side. We'll get to a critical mass here in New Zealand, and we'll be able to grow from there. Now, here's an interesting thing, which is that. Because of the online space, what we're actually very close to doing is setting up a 3PL site in Melbourne. And so we've had quite a bit of interest from offshore, just people coming in. Actually, people have tried to order, and we have. So
it's third-party logistics for those that don't know what 3PL stands for.
So because we don't own anything, and this is one of the reasons why we can do it the way we're doing this, is that we haven't invested a lot of money in plant or in warehouses or in full-time people. So I have a magnificent team of 5 people. They're all part-time, They all have other gigs that they're working on. They love this one. The other ones make them money. They love the other ones. But they have a spread of things that they love doing, which is fantastic. So for us, we have this access to team of 5 amazing different people with different roles, but we don't have 5 full-time people. So one of the things that we can do is, so in Melbourne, we can set up 3PL being a third-party warehouse. They'll pick our orders for us. They'll deliver them for us. All we have to do is set up our online store and set up everything can be done from here. So it's a really low risk. I have to send a few pallets over to Australia to trial it. So that on the online space, I think you're right on the vein. And in one sense, the new world is going to be a good one in that sense that online sales, I think people are buying more and more beverages online. So, and it can transport across borders quite readily. So, it'll be interesting to see what the response is, because New Zealand's actually one of the hardest markets to become a profitable business in, unless you're a niche, high margin business. It's really difficult in the volume areas, because you have the same things that everyone else has anywhere else, in terms of you've got guerrilla incumbents. They'll smash you every chance they get. They'll drop whatever it is, but you also have a population of 5 million. So the size of the prize is that big. So one of the thoughts that I had from the beginning was that we might not make it in New Zealand. We might not actually get to critical mass and profitability in New Zealand, because we have to sell at such a low price ourselves with such low volumes ourselves. So I've always thought, okay, let's make it so we can actually, the market opportunity exists in the world. Let's see if we can't crack it in the rest of the world too. So we have trademarks registered, or just about to be registered, in 15 select countries around the world for Skinny Fizz. 5 in Asia, Australia, a few in Europe, America, Mexico. So we've set ourselves up for that capability, and I'm now bringing that forward. I'm now saying, okay, well, now it's time. We may as well, since we've had interest out of Victoria, we may as well see if we can't set up an online shop. And we have. So I've spent a lot of time in basketball. I've done a lot of basketball coaching help. So when I retired from private equity and venture capital, I spent about 3 years, coaching basketball. Ran the Hutt Valley Basketball Association during that time. Helped about 6 kids get scholarships to play basketball in the US. I'm kind of well connected in basketball world, if that makes sense. So I have people who would love to work kind of part-time with us in Melbourne, who would go and knock on some doors and get us into some cafes and kind of Faro New World type equivalent upmarket stores and that sort of thing. So we can do it kind of in a low key way that way too. So we're going to have a go doing that. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
I like how you've explained this, because it almost flies in the face of the business plan, right? You've just said that you may not actually make it in New Zealand, right? So you launch an entire business knowing that this may not be viable within the primary market, which is a lot of the time actually what Chinese brands do, is they know that eventually there'll be such hyper competition locally that the only way they make it is by going abroad, whereas almost every other Western country makes all of their supernormal profit in their home country and then makes a proportion of it when they go abroad. Whereas you've made peace from that at an early stage and have now just following the breadcrumbs of potential opportunity. Melbourne, it might take that route, it might not. It's going to take you, cost you a few cases and some time and some maybe to pull on some of those connections you've got to try it. But you're following where potential early success may lie, those gold seams. And then once you find 3 or 4, that's maybe all you need to then just keep on servicing that market, that need, or that particular use case, depending on where they arise.
Yep, spot on. Yeah, absolutely right, and spot on. And we're having a little look at the US market too, believe it or not, in LA with I think I in fact even saw or listened to Lily Martok from Manuti, great people, absolutely. And they're looking at, we might see if we can't sort of do something jointly in the US. They're very, doing very well in the US. And so we sort of looked, and I thought, wow, that's a really interesting, great people. And so there's another potential little one that we just light a little fire over there and see what happens. So that's, it's hard to know, but as I say, the market opportunity does exist in the rest of the world. And it's very similar to here. So did you ever hear of A2 milk before it became huge in Australia?
I had heard of it, but I'm not sure whether that was before or after Australia. I bought shares, actually, disclosure, in the company, because my usual approach to things is when I hear about it, I think, why didn't I know about it earlier? And then I realize in some things I'm just way earlier anyway. I should get into that thing, even though it looks like it's already on its way. So I'm not very, very early, but once it's already going, I usually am aware of it.
I think that's a brand that made it in Australia first before it actually made it here. In a way, it was, they got big in Australia before they got big in New Zealand. Was my understanding of it. So there are examples of companies that have actually gone offshore first, and then and then kind of filled back in.
I think another one to look out for is sheep milk. I think sheep milk could become bigger than dairy in New Zealand, and it's currently at 10,000 sheep.
I love sheep milk cheese. Sheep milk cheese is beautiful. I'm with you. I'm with you, brother. Yeah, I'm with you.
The other thing I was thinking about there, when you talked about Lily Ma, who was previously on a Kiwi original, is that the ability for New Zealand business owners to actually collaborate with someone in a market with completely different products, completely different, they're not being bundled at all, but just collaborate in terms of connectivity, relationships, so that you can both learn about the market, access different parts of the market. I think that's an area to explore with businesses. And the other one is around audience funneling, right? So where you work with someone or a business that already has an audience. That probably the worst of it is Instagram influencers, but the best would be something that's complementary, like someone that sells basketball tickets, or someone that sells gourmet meat, or somewhere where there's a likelihood for people to be getting together, and this becomes something to talk about, right? So, it might not drive volume, but it drives awareness in a way that you don't have to pay to get that experience.
Yeah. No, look, that's a really good. That's a good insight. That's a good insight. And with Lily and the kind of cross fertilization that you do so well in terms of putting people together like you do in this, the whole setting that you do and the way you do it is fantastic, because Lily has already taught us, she's already told me so many things that it would have taken me 3 months to bash my head into the wall of America, even though I grew up in America and I spent 23 years there. I would have been bashing my head for 3 months, and she told me in about 10 minutes the various things that she'd bashed her head, or maybe somebody had told her, I don't know. I said it was incredibly invaluable already.
That's great to hear, and that's the benefit of the New Zealand-made group, is that you can shortcut some of those learnings or lost opportunities or time to get up to speed, because you're dealing with someone that is semi-trusted within the group.
Totally. Actually, that's enormously valuable. The fact that it was through the group, that I was talking to Lily and Manuti. I think hopefully she felt the same way. We instantly had a fruitful conversation without any dancing around or holding back, or everything came out, and that was part of why it was so invaluable, because it just, it was, I can trust it. You're right. It's a good point. It's good. Yeah.
The peer-to-peer knowledge transfer, because we're a small country. We can actually afford to be quite open with each other about our businesses, because the world is so big. The 99.8% of the gross domestic product of the world is not here. You can give away your entire business model, how you do things, where you do it, and it still kind of doesn't really matter. I mean, it does at a domestic level, but internationally, it's a different thing.
No, you're right, and it is great, and yeah, the more people the more of this networking. Well, I hate that word, but cross-fertilization of people that you do, the better. It is so. Yeah, and you're right. We can be open with each other, and it would be great if we could. It would be great if there could be almost sort of in some industry body association type, I guess, bodies that could almost help you, I guess, in a way, vocalize the fact that people really should be buying New Zealand products. Yeah, they might be a bit more expensive because you're getting a lower volume produced product, but it is going to be better. I almost guarantee it. It is going to be, and it's going to be better for the planet, and it's going to be better for us, because if you buy a New Zealand product, then you're employing another New Zealander. So it's sort of, I've often thought about formalizing it, turn maybe into some other bodies to help with that screaming from the rooftop that you do so well, but you're sometimes a lone voice, I'd imagine.
I think that over the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to be some macro things at play that will put New Zealand in a pretty positive position. I think one is when you talk about those limes and the lemons, the taste here, or the carrots that come from Invercargill, from Southern Cross Produce, Malcolm Matthew down there, strawberries taste sweeter, carrots taste sweeter. Through climate change and global warming and the way carbon dioxide interacts with plants, it reduces the amount of taste in food. So there will be a flight to quality, and New Zealand can be their answer to quality. The second area is kind of more near term, but still middle term, is the COVID response. Jeff Bezos has said that inoculated supply chain is his number one priority now. He wants it free of COVID, the people, the products, the process, everything. Mm-hmm. And if he can do that, then he believes consumers will choose inoculated supply chains over ones that aren't. Now, if New Zealand gets back to elimination, and we have these better tasting products associated with it over the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years, assuming COVID doesn't go away, but it gets managed, what type of products do you want to buy? You want to buy them from an inoculated supply chain with a great tasting product that comes from a country where it's eliminated, right? Like, it makes sense.
That's a really good insight. That's a really interesting insight. I hadn't put those two things together. God, it's a changing world, isn't it? Things are moving quickly. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. You can just see it now. Oh, you could buy, yes, you could buy the COVID-free drinks, or you can get the drinks with COVID. Which would you prefer?
And it's a perception, though, right? Like the milk that comes from the Netherlands into China is good milk. The milk that comes from New Zealand into China is good milk. The perception of New Zealand's milk is about our clean and green image, not just whether it's good milk. So what is the COVID elimination perception, and how does that halo effect help food and beverage? I think it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years.
That is a very interesting one. Yeah. Well, let's touch wood and hope we can keep the elimination strategy going. Team of 5 million.
Team of 5 million. Shawn, it's been fantastic talking. We could talk for ages, and we have met up in person, and that's probably where some of the warm congeniality has come from in this conversation, and allowed us to go in probably a route that wouldn't normally be the case because of your background in venture capital and investing, and how that shaped this organization, Skinny Fizz, that you're shepherding along its journey. And I think for those in food and beverage to hear some of the insights and decisions you've made thus far will be fascinating. So thank you so much for being so open with that information.
Well, Ryan, you're a bloody good guy on a bloody good mission. So anything that I said of any use to anyone, then that's great. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat with you. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome. And for those listening thinking, I want to try the Skinny Fizz, I'll do the sales pitch for you, Shawn. So go to skinnyfizz.co.nz. And as a disclosure, Shawn does provide our office with Skinny Fizz on a regular basis. So the rest of Business NZ have tried all the flavors. One of the boys that comes in every Wednesday and Friday after school, we've made the rule in the office that with the raspberry flavor, you can have, one or two a week, that goes around, but with the raspberry flavor, always leave 2 cans for Benji so that when he turns up after school, there's one on a Wednesday and one on a Friday for him. And that's kept the tragedy of the commons away so far.
Oh, brilliant. That's brilliant. Oh, that's brilliant. Actually, regular order, I owe you some. I'm sorry about that, Ryan. I'm sorry about that. I'll get some on the way to you soon.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate it, Shawn, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Ryan.